HOA took my mailbox, said it was not up to community aesthetic standards. Never mind that it was a handmade cedar postbox I carved myself with a brass flag and my granddad's initials etched into the side. It stood at the edge of my property for 13 years without complaint. But one Tuesday morning, I found it gone. No warning. Just a hole in the dirt and a smug letter from the HOA president, Sharon, stuffed in my screen door. According to her, I had 14 days to install one of the pre-approved, mass-produced black mailboxes that dotted the neighborhood like soulless clones. That was the last straw. You see, I'm a retired historical engineer, worked on theme parks, medieval exhibitions, and even a couple castles overseas. I don't just build things, I build statements. And if they wanted to turn this into a war of aesthetics, fine. I'd bring a trebuchet to their paper sword fight. I took the next week off and drove out to my cousin's metal shop. We spent 4 days cutting, welding, and assembling. The neighbors probably thought I was putting up a gazebo or maybe a treehouse, but no. I was erecting a 14-foot-tall medieval-style guard, towerfully functional staircase, arrow slits, parapet, the whole 9 yards, right in the spot where my mailbox used to stand. And at the base of it, a new mailbox, crafted from iron and oak, bolted to a stone pedestal, with a sign that read, "You may take my box, but you'll never take my postage." The tower was technically on my land, met zoning height, didn't violate any setback rules. I triple-checked the code book the HOA liked to quote like scripture. Sharon came marching over within hours of the unveiling, red-faced and sputtering about how, "This isn't medieval times." I calmly offered her a seat on the bench below the tower, where I'd mounted a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws with all the parts she conveniently forgot to read highlighted in gold. That night, the neighborhood gathered. Kids were climbing the tower. Adults were taking selfies with the drawbridge-style mailbox. My house became a landmark. Even the mail carrier left a note, "Coolest box on my route." The HOA called an emergency meeting. I attended with blueprints and a laser pointer. They couldn't do a thing. My structure stood, my mail flowed, and their authority crumbled like old mortar. Now, every time Sharon drives past, she speeds up a little, pretending not to look, but the tower's shadow crosses her windshield. A reminder that when you strip someone's dignity without cause, they might just rebuild it stone by stone and aim it right back at you. The next morning, I was sipping coffee from my porch as the early sun hit the tower just right, casting a long shadow across the manicured lawns of my HOA strangled neighborhood. It was beautiful. Regal even. I had stained the wood a deep mahogany, and the iron fixtures gleamed like something out of a fantasy epic. You'd think it would be over now, right? I'd made my point. But no. Sharon and her council of clipboard crusaders weren't done. That week, I started getting letters. First, a friendly reminder that non-standard structures may cause property value concerns. Then, a formal suggestion that I voluntarily remove the unsanctioned fixture for the greater community good. And finally, a certified envelope with language that practically bled desperation. Failure to comply may result in further action, as outlined in Section 8, Subsection B, Paragraph 6 of the HOA Covenants. They wanted a war? Fine. I replied with a letter of my own, written on parchment, sealed with wax, and delivered via a small trebuchet I had mounted on my porch rail. The scroll landed squarely on Sharon's doorstep with a satisfying thunk. Inside, I quoted the exact sections they referenced, each followed by the phrase, "not applicable," in medieval script. And that's when things got weirder. Sharon escalated. She hired an inspector. Guy came out with a clipboard and a level, pacing around the base of the tower, muttering about non-compliance metrics. I met him at the gate in full chainmail armor, not joking. It's amazing what you can get from Renaissance fairs these days. I even had a helmet with a retractable visor. "May I help you, good sir?" I asked, raising the visor with a clang. He blinked, mumbled something about measurements, and shuffled away without writing a single note. The next day, I hosted Mailfest. Yep, a neighborhood event with turkey legs, live loop music, and mock jousting in the cul-de-sac. Kids dressed as squires and knights delivered party invites by hand and scrolls, of course. People laughed, ate, took tower tours, and suddenly the narrative shifted. My neighbors, most of whom silently endured HOA nonsense, started to rally. Jim from 2 houses down built a mini drawbridge over his garden bed. Ellie installed a small dragon statue atop her garage. The neighborhood that used to be beige and boring began to turn into a page from a storybook. Sharon tried to shut it all down. She sent cease and desist, threatened fines, called another emergency meeting. This time, I went in costume, full cloak, sword at my side, blunted, obviously, and a binder thicker than a knight's codex. I laid out every code, every measurement, every picture of her selectively enforcing rules on certain homes but not others. Then I presented the pièce de résistance, a petition signed by 76% of the residents demanding a change in leadership and a vote of no confidence. She stuttered, she fumed, but she couldn't argue with numbers. The meeting ended with her storming out and slamming the door so hard it knocked over the complimentary lemonade pitcher. 2 weeks later, Sharon resigned. The HOA board was restructured. A new president, Gina, a former architect and fan of Game of Thrones, took over. Her first act? Approving the tower retroactively and declaring it a neighborhood cultural landmark. Now it stands not just as a mailbox, but as a symbol of rebellion, creativity, and the power of saying no more. So if someone ever tries to strip you of something personal under the guise of aesthetics, don't just fight back, build back, taller, stronger, and with battlements. Of course, victory didn't mean peace. That's the thing they never tell you about standing up to tyranny wrapped in a cardigan. Once the dragon slain, you still have to live with the villagers, and some of them like the old ways. Passive-aggressive emails still showed up now and then, subject lines like, concerned about tower shadow, or is the mailbox really necessary? But those were nothing more than the dying gasps of a deposed regime. Still, I wasn't content to rest on my laurels. No, I doubled down. The tower got upgrades. First came the lighting. Solar-powered sconces on each corner, flickering like torches at dusk. Then the flagrant actual banner, deep crimson with a silver paw's thorn embroidered in the center, flying proudly from the highest beam. My niece, who studies medieval studies, hand-stitched it as a housewarming gift, or, more accurately, a tower-warming one. After that, I added a bell. Not just any Bella proper bronze bell I salvaged from an old church auction. Hung it up there with a pulley system and started ringing it at 8 a.m. Sharp every Saturday when mail was delivered. The mailman loved it. The HOA's old guard did not. Gina, our new president, stopped by one morning with coffee and a grin. You know, she said, sipping, you've turned this place into a tourist attraction. Property values are actually up. Music to my ears. Soon, kids from other neighborhoods started biking in just to see the mailbox fortress. Their parents followed. I caught one guy sketching it for an architecture blog. Another woman asked if she could host a Renaissance-themed birthday party at the base. I said yes, of course. I even built a little drawbridge table for the cake. Then came the local news. I knew I'd made it when a reporter and her camera crew knocked on my door one sunny morning. She introduced herself with a smile that said, "We heard there's a story here." I gave them the tour, pointed out the iron detailing, the waterproof oak hinge system, the turret top viewing deck. She filmed it all. The segment aired that night. Local man wages war with HOA using medieval engineering. It went viral. Suddenly, I was getting emails from people across the country. My HOA won't let me have wind chimes. What do I do? Can you design a Renaissance garden for my front lawn? Is there a blueprint for the tower? Yes, and absolutely. I made the blueprints public, created a free website, reclaimthyland.com, uploaded guides, zoning tips, design walkthroughs. It exploded. Forums popped up, support groups. A whole movement of creatively rebellious homeowners was born, and the symbol of it all? My little tower. The irony? All Sharon had to do was knock on my door and ask me to tweak the mailbox. I would have done it. But she chose power over neighborliness. And instead, she built a monument to her own downfall. A few months later, I heard she moved, sold her house, and relocated to a gated community 3 towns over one, with stricter rules and no guard towers in sight. That, to me, was the ultimate victory. Now every morning, I walk past that tower and smile, not because of what it is, but because of what it means. Because when someone takes what's yours, you have 2 choices: roll over or rise up. And me? I built a castle out of spite and invited the whole kingdom. It's funny how quickly the ridiculous becomes iconic. What started as a middle finger to HOA tyranny had grown into something bigger. I drive home from the grocery store and pass people posing in front of the tower, kids pretending to storm the steps, teens filming TikToks pretending to be knights or princesses. Some days I'd find little offerings left at the base: handmade scrolls, toy swords, plastic dragons. I started leaning into it. Why not? I installed a guest book inside the tower, just a weatherproof box with a journal and a pen. Within a week, it was filled with notes. Messages like, "This gave me hope after our HOA banned sunflowers." Or, "My dad said if you could do this, we could build a garden gnome army." One note simply said, "Viva la Mailbox." Then came the tower tours. At first, it was just a joke between me and a few neighbors. 5 cents to climb the stairs. But people took it seriously. They wanted to see the view from the top. So I cleared the interior a bit, added railings, even put up an information plaque. Construction began after HOA aggression in the year of our Lord 2025. Built from the ashes of tyranny. Long live mail. I started giving weekend tours, dressed in a robe, spoken ye olde English. Here standeth the finest post receptacle in all the land. We laughed, we bonded, and most importantly, we healed. The neighborhood, that is. Because while Sharon had ruled with a clipboard and an iron will, Gina governed with a smile and open ears. Under her leadership, we rewrote sections of the HOA charter. Homeowners could now submit creative designs for approval. There was a new cultural uniqueness clause, and community votes replaced arbitrary board decisions. Some neighbors still liked their uniform bushes and gray mailboxes. That was fine. Others, they bloomed. Jim added a mural to his garage in epic sea battle with krakens and longships. Ellie installed wind chimes made from old teacups. One guy built a hobbit door on his tool shed, and no one complained. The neighborhood turned into a storybook, and then one day the mail stopped. Not permanently, just for the afternoon. My regular carrier, Dave, had taken a detour. When I walked down to check what was up, I saw him, standing by the tower, showing it to a group of new hires. "This," he said, patting the base like a proud uncle, "is the gold standard. They took his mailbox. He gave him a monument. We call it the Castle of Correspondence." I almost cried. Not because of the name, though it was brilliant, but because I realized then it wasn't about revenge anymore. It hadn't been for a while. It was about turning insult into art, rules into rebellion, a fight into a festival. Later that week, I got a letter in the mail from a woman named Linda. She lived in Florida and had read about the tower online. Her HOA fined her for planting native wildflowers. Said it looked unkempt, so she turned her yard into a mini Everglades, complete with a gator statue and a sign that read, "Nature happens." Her note ended with, "Thanks for inspiring me. I stood taller because you built higher." That letter? It's framed in the tower now, right next to the guest book. So to anyone dealing with pettiness disguised as policy, here's my advice. Don't just fight. Create, outbuild, outshine, outlast. Because sometimes the best revenge is architecture. About 6 months after the tower's maiden bell rang, something strange started happening. Not hostile, just unexpected. Other neighborhoods started reaching out. Not just people writing messages of support, but full-blown HOA boards asking if I could consult. One even offered to fly me out to Ohio. Apparently, word had spread, that I wasn't just a guy with a stubborn streak, I was the patron saint of suburban rebellion, the mailbox martyr, the postmaster general of justice. I had turned them down, mostly. I wasn't interested in becoming some traveling knight of covenants and bylaws. But I did help a few folks online, offered blueprint tips, shared some zoning loopholes, taught a guy in Nebraska how to file an injunction against mailbox discrimination. He ended up building a Viking-themed Dropbox with a dragon head. Beautiful work. Then came the college invitation. A university's urban studies department asked if I'd speak on community aesthetics and individual expression in modern suburbia. I laughed for a full 5 minutes, then agreed. I showed up in a tunic, brought slides of the tower's construction, talked about social rigidity, passive-aggressive power structures, and the ancient power of storytelling. The students ate it up. One of them even proposed turning my tale into a short animated film. Meanwhile, back at home, the tower entered what I like to call its golden age. It became the heart of the neighborhood. Holiday decorations went up around it, cobwebs for Halloween, twinkling lights for Christmas, even a giant foam heart for Valentine's. One day I walked out to find a group of teenagers sitting in the grass around it, playing cards and laughing. I waved, expecting them to scatter. But one of them looked up and said, "Hey man, your place is cool. Like, actually cool." That might have meant more to me than the college invite. Because here's what I realized. It wasn't about medieval towers or HOA policies anymore. It was about carving out space literal and metaphorical for joy, weirdness, and unapologetic individuality. In a world that kept trying to paste the same beige template on every block, this was a declaration. You don't get to flatten people into silence. But of course, this wouldn't be a good story without one last twist. One afternoon, a black SUV with tinted windows rolled up and parked in front of my house. Two guys in suits got out real corporate types. They walked right up my driveway, squinting at the tower like it owed them money. I opened the door, wiping sawdust off my hands. I'd been working on a catapult model for a neighborhood science day. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" One of them flashed a badge. "We're from the Department of Municipal Infrastructure. There's been a complaint about unauthorized zoning variances." I smiled. Ah, the last boss battle. Turns out, Sharon had filed one final grievance before moving away, trying to nail me on a technicality buried in county code. Something about non-habitational structures exceeding view plane thresholds. But I was ready. I invited them inside, offered tea, showed them the files, permits, surveyor reports, even had a notarized statement from the city planner's office confirming the tower's compliance under the amended HOA charter. They stayed for half an hour, left empty-handed. As they walked back to their SUV, one of them paused, looked up at the tower, and muttered, "I'll be damned. That's actually pretty impressive." And that, my friends, was the final word. So yeah, they took my mailbox, but I gave them a legend. And now, when the sun sets and the last golden rays strike the tower just right, you can still hear the mail bell ring. A sound not just of letters delivered, but of dignity defended. Of rebellion raised in wood and stone. Of one man who said, "Enough," and meant it. Time passed, seasons turned, the tower stood. By the 1-year anniversary, the structure had outlived 2 lawn chairs, 3 mail carriers, and at least 5 passive-aggressive HOA emails. That's when I got the idea for the Jubilee. Not a party and event. If the HOA could hold endless mandatory beautification walks, I could throw a medieval festival right in the cul-de-sac. I called it the first annual Tower Day. Flyers were printed on parchment-style paper. The font? Gothic calligraphy, obviously. I secured a temporary events permit from the city, took all of 5 minutes. Now that the planning office followed me on social media and sent out invites, not just to neighbors, but to the surrounding towns. We had blacksmiths doing demos, a falconer with a real hawk, a guy selling turkey legs out of a portable smoker. Local musicians played on a stage I built from old shipping pallets. There was a maypole. A wheel of cheese rolled downhill. At noon, I stood on the top of the tower and read a proclamation through a bullhorn. Whereas the community once suffered under dullness and tyranny, and whereas one humble mailbox gave rise to a fortress of freedom, let it be known that this day shall forever celebrate creative defiance, architectural rebellion, and the right to receive mail with dignity. The crowd roared. Kids reenacted the Battle of the Bylaws with foam swords. Someone sold t-shirts that said, "Come and mail it." A local podcast showed up and interviewed me in character. That night, we lit the Beacona massive bonfire built in the old HOA common space. Even the new board members joined, roasting marshmallows and telling stories about the great Sharon Exodus. Somewhere around midnight, I found myself sitting alone at the base of the tower, sipping cider and watching the embers float up into the dark. The neighborhood had changed so much. We'd all changed. And yet, the tower still had more to do. The next morning, I got an email from a nonprofit. They'd heard about Tower Day and wanted to partner with me. Their mission? Helping homeowners fight unjust HOA overreach through legal aid and creative support. They asked if I'd consider being their honorary champion of expression. I told them I'd think about it. Then I said, yes. So now, in addition to the tower tours and neighborhood events, I write a monthly column, The Herald of Homefront Liberty. I talk about what it means to protect your space, your voice, your mailbox. Every once in a while, I still get letters. A woman in Oregon who was told her ceramic frogs violated natural lawn aesthetics and responded by turning her front yard into a full-blown fairy tale diorama. A man in Arizona who built a functioning lighthouse in his driveway after the HOA demanded he remove a small solar light. An elderly couple in New Jersey who painted their garage door into a trompe-l'oeil bookshelf filled with imaginary titles like bylaws and other lies. They all start the same way. I heard your story. It gave me courage. And that's when it hit me. What they took from me wasn't just a mailbox. It was my say, my choice, my quiet bit of dignity. But in trying to erase me, they made me louder, taller, unignorable. Now, as the years stretch on, the tower's begun to weather-edged wood, softened iron, ivy curling at its feet. But it still stands tall, still holds the mail, still reminds every passerby that there's power in refusing to shrink. Because here's the thing, rebellion doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it just has to be built with your own two hands, planted where no one expects it, and impossible to ignore. And if it rings a bell when the mail arrives, even better. It was around the second Tower Day when the first tour bus rolled through. At first, I thought someone had just rented one for a family reunion until I saw the logo on the side. American Oddities, Roadside Wonders Edition. Out stepped 24 retirees, each armed with a camera, fanny packs, and the hungry gleam of people who had just sat through 4 hours of roadside Americana trivia. Their guide approached me with a printed flyer in hand featuring none other than my tower. "Sir, is this the structure known as the Postal Bastion of Resistance?" I blinked. Yes, that would be me." Within minutes, they were exploring every inch-snapping selfies on the spiral stairs, reading the guest book, even posing dramatically in front of the parapets. One woman asked if I'd sign her copy of Architectural Anarchy Monthly, where the tower had apparently been featured in an article titled, "When HOA Met Its Match." I signed it, Sir Post-a-Lot. After they left, I sat down in my workshop and stared at the wall. I had built a shrine to spite, but now it was legend, and legends grow. So I did the only logical thing, expansion. Behind the tower, I broke ground on the courtyard of creative defiance. It was part sculpture garden, part community space, part museum. I built a walking path with engraved stones donated by other HOA survivors, each one bearing a quote like, "They took my tomato plants. I planted hope instead. One man's lawn gnome is another's symbol of freedom. Picket fences can't keep out dreams." We added benches, shade sails, an open-air lending library shaped like a tiny tavern. A neighbor contributed a mosaic of the tower made entirely from broken HOA-issued mailbox shards. That one got a lot of laughs. I added a plaque, This space is dedicated to the beauty of refusal and the courage to build strange things. And people came, not just from across the state, but across the country. I met a veteran from Vermont who said it reminded him of holding the line. A teenage artist from Detroit who sketched the tower and said, "I wish my city had one." Even a former HOA president from Nevada who whispered, "I used to be like Sharon, then I found this place." The media came back again, this time a documentary crew. They stayed a week, shot interviews, recorded tower chimes, ate every last turkey leg from the vendor cart I kept parked out front during weekends. We called the film Boxed In: One Man's Rebellion Against Regulation. It premiered at a local indie film festival. We didn't win, but we got a standing ovation. Meanwhile, Sharon's name faded like an old paint job. She'd become something of a cautionary tale. New HOA boards across the country started inviting me to speak, not to mock her, but to help them avoid becoming her. It was poetic, really. From tyrant to teaching tool. But success, I've learned, brings new challenges. One evening, I got a letter no envelope, just a parchment scroll shoved under my door. It read, "The HOA fights in shadows now. Beware the zoning revision. No signature." At first, I laughed. But then I noticed the city council had posted a quiet update on their website, obscure proposed amendment to the zoning code. It would reclassify non-primary vertical structures over 12 feet as community impact installations, subject to new fees, inspections, and most dangerous approval by external consultants. It was a slow kill. So I gathered my allies. We formed the Guardians of the Garrison. Local architects, lawyers, civil rights nerds, and a surprisingly savvy 10-year-old named Benny who knew more about local statutes than most adults. We campaigned, posted flyers, held community meetings. I gave a speech under torchlight, surrounded by banners of every banned garden item and every fined porch light configuration. It was dramatic. It was effective. And the amendment? Defeated. By unanimous vote. So I sent another trebuchet scroll, this one to the council. It read, "Thank you for protecting what truly matters. The post shall endure." Because here's what I've learned. Through every scroll, every screw, every standoff, they can write all the rules they want. But if you build something with purpose, with heart, with defiance so elegant it becomes irresistible, they can't stop it. They'll try. They'll bluster and threaten and hide behind bylaws and double talk. But at the end of the day, the tower still stands. And when the sun sets and the flags ripple in the breeze and a family snaps a photo in front of a monument born of stubbornness and cedar, that's when I know this was never just about a mailbox. It was about giving people permission to be interesting. The day the tower turned 3, I got a actual letter from the United States Postal Service. Now, I know what you're thinking. A cease and desist? A warning about unauthorized structures interfering with mail protocol? Nope. Quite the opposite. It was an award. I kid you not. The letterhead read, U.S. Postal Service, Regional Recognition Committee. Inside was a certificate declaring my humble tower the most creative residential mailbox installation in the Western region. Signed, stamped, and this is my favorite part, embossed with a tiny golden eagle. They even included a commemorative patch. I sewed it onto the cloak I wear during tower tours, next to the quote, "Neither snow, nor rain, nor overreaching bylaws." The local postmaster general showed up the following week with a photographer and a grin that stretched ear to ear. We posed at the base of the tower with my mail carrier Dave, who now wore custom epaulets on his USPS uniform thanks to the neighbor's crafting club. It was absurd and magnificent. But as with all good tales, change was looming on the horizon. A letter arrived, handwritten, elegant cursive, sealed with real wax. It was from Sharon. Yes, that Sharon. Apparently, she'd been following the story for some time. She said the documentary made her cry, particularly the part where I read the Tower Day proclamation. "You built something beautiful," she wrote. "I didn't see it back then. I only saw disruption. But now, I see it was community." I didn't expect the lump in my throat, or the genuine sigh that followed. She even included a small wooden replica of the tower, carved by her husband, who'd taken up woodworking in retirement. She ended the letter with a question: "Would you let me visit?" Of course I said yes. She came quietly on a weekday, no fanfare. Just her, a small handbag, and that nervous smile you wear when you've been both villain and witness. I met her at the tower base. "It's taller than I imagined," she said, tilting her head. I nodded. Spite has strong foundations. We laughed, truly laughed for the first time. She toured the garden, signed the guest book, and even climbed the stairs with a cane in one hand. At the top, she looked out over the transformed neighborhood, the murals, the hobbit doors, the wind chimes and mosaics. "I wanted it all to match," she murmured. I thought matching meant peace. I didn't know it meant silence. We stood there a while. Then she took a deep breath and said, "You should run for council." I nearly dropped my goblet of cranberry juice. "Me? I'm just a guy with a nail gun and an attitude." "You're a builder," she said, "and builders shape more than towers." That stuck with me. So I did it. I ran. Not for HOA board bin there, demolished that, but for city council. And I won. Turns out, when you have a tower in your yard and a horde of loyal mail-receiving citizens, votes come easy. Now, I spend my days pushing for architectural freedom ordinances, negotiating between grumpy residents and ambitious artists, and trying to balance creativity with safety. It's messy. It's exhausting. But every time I pass the tower and see a family pointing or a child dropping a letter in the iron-bound box, I remember where it all started. With a hole in the ground and a ridiculous idea. People say the tower is the symbol, the rebellion, the victory. But they're wrong. The tower is the mailbox. The real symbol is what came after what people did when they realized they could do more than comply. They could create. They could inspire. They could build. One brick, one post, one letter at a time. In year 4, something happened that made me pause longer than usual beneath the tower's overhang. A young couple moved in 3 houses down. Fresh out of grad school, nervous smiles, cardboard boxes stacked like fortresses in their driveway. We all remember that feeling, starting over with nothing but hope and a mediocre blender. They walked over one evening as I was trimming ivy off the tower's western wall. The guy introduced himself as Evan, the woman as Layla. They didn't ask about the tower. They thanked me for it. Layla said it gave them the confidence to buy in this neighborhood, that seeing a place where creativity wasn't just tolerated but celebrated made them feel like maybe, just maybe, this was a community worth planting roots in. I invited them for cider under the parapet. That night, something clicked in me. Not a spark of rebellion this time, but one of stewardship. You see, the tower had started as a protest, grown into a monument, and eventually turned into a movement. But what I hadn't realized until then was that it had become something else entirely. It had become a promise. A promise that ridiculous rules can be broken, that beauty can be bizarre, that communities can evolve, not through control, but through character. So I made a new plan. Every spring now, we host a tower apprenticeship. It's a mentorship program for local teens who want to build something. Doesn't matter what. A weird bench, a mailbox shaped like a dragon's head, a sculpture of a horse made from keys. I give them space in the courtyard of creative defiance. They get supplies, guidance, and most importantly, no one telling them that's not allowed. The results? Amazing. A 15-year-old built a working sundial mailbox. A shy kid who barely spoke now teaches younger ones how to craft stained glass. A pair of twins constructed a tiny chapel to honor the sacred right to personalize lawn art. We added spotlights for nighttime, informational plaques, even QR codes linking to each creator's story. People come from cities away just to walk through the garden and read about the rebellion that turned into Renaissance. And the city? They finally gave it a name. On the map now, our neighborhood has a nickname: the Keep and the Tower, officially designated a community historical landmark. It was during the unveiling ceremony that I saw something I hadn't expected, my own reflection, standing between two eras. The guy I used to be grumpy, cornered, hammer in hand, and the man I had become grateful, grounded, surrounded by voices that once echoed alone. As they raised the landmark plaque and the crowd clapped, I looked up at the tower one more time, still proud, still absurd, still glorious. And then, of course, a pigeon pooped on my shoulder. Balance, I suppose. But I didn't mind, because that's life in the keep. Sometimes poetic, sometimes petty, always personal. So to anyone out there battling the beige, I say this. Raise your tower. Hang your wind chimes. Plant your frogs. And when they try to tear it down, you look them in the eye and say, this is more than a mailbox. This is my flag. And may your postage always arrive on time. By the time the 5th Tower Day arrived, I had stopped counting visitors. What began as neighborhood curiosity had ballooned into a national curiosity. There were documentaries, fan art, and even a Halloween costume line where people dressed as the HOA warden and Sir Parcelot. A couple from Wisconsin eloped in front of the tower and asked if I would officiate dressed in full night regalia. I did. They exchanged vows beneath the stone arch, with vows like, I promise to never file noise complaints unless it's truly egregious. The tower had become something more than I'd ever intended. But with every success came the pressure to keep it. Pristine, relevant, worthy. There were whispers, quiet ones at first. Was the tower losing its edge? Had it gone soft? Was it now just another tourist stop, no different than a giant ball of twine? I heard them, and I felt it too. So one night, well after midnight, I sat alone under the iron mailbox, the stars washing everything in quiet silver. I thought about the beginning, the fury, the audacity, the thrill of reclaiming my dignity with lumber and spite. Somewhere in the growth, I'd become safe. And the tower? It deserved more than safety. It deserved renewal. So I did something drastic. I decommissioned the upper deck, removed the railing, took down the banner, replaced the lookout perch with scaffolding, and a plaque that simply read, under restoration, let the next voice be heard. It confused people, angered some. Why fix what isn't broken? They asked. But it wasn't about fixing. It was about passing the torch. I opened applications, told the community I wanted the next evolution of the tower to be designed not by me but by someone else. Anyone, young or old, builder or dreamer. Over 70 submissions came in. A retiree who wanted to turn the upper chamber into a rotating art exhibit. A high school robotics team that proposed a mechanical owl perch that hooted every time mail was delivered. A 6-year-old who wanted a dragon slide and also snacks. The winner? A quiet woman named Noor, a local welder and mosaic artist who suggested a stained glass dome to cap the Tawervri pain contributed by a different resident. A literal patchwork of stories, colors, and rebellion. It was perfect. We built it together. Work days turned into block parties. Someone brought a pizza oven. Kids drew designs in chalk before tracing them onto glass. Even Dave the mailman helped install the dome, sweating and laughing as light poured through the colors onto his USPS hat. The result was breathtaking. During sunrise and sunset, the dome threw patterns across the courtyard like a kaleidoscope. It felt alive, like the tower had been reborn not as a symbol of defiance, but as a living archive of all the people who stood up, spoke out, or just dared to be different. And that's when I knew the story was no longer mine. It belonged to everyone who ever felt boxed in, to every person who opened a letter and found courage inside, to every rebel with a ruler and a dream. That winter, I stepped back, not from the tower but from being its face. The courtyard committee now ran events. The apprentices led tours. Kids wrote newsletters with tower facts and mail jokes of the week. I stayed involved, of course, maintained the hinges, polished the brass flag, but I watched from the edges, heart full, hands finally able to rest. And one snowy night, as I stood on the porch, cider steaming in my cup, I saw a young boy, maybe 7, walk up to the tower, drop a letter in the box, and salute. He didn't look around for an audience. He didn't expect applause. He just believed. And that, more than anything, told me we'd done it right. We hadn't just won. We'd changed the rules. One post, one brick, one ridiculous, glorious tower at a time. Spring came early the next year, bringing with it the scent of lilac, the hum of bees, and a sense of peace that felt earned, not accidental. The courtyard of creative defiance was in bloom, both figuratively and literally. New flowers sprouted along the walking path, and someone had carved a bench shaped like a scroll, etched with a quote from my original parchment letter, "You may take my box, but you'll never take my postage." I hadn't written that line to be immortal, but here it was, a permanent part of a place that outgrew even my wildest plans. That's when the historian showed up. She arrived in a faded green Subaru with New Hampshire plates and a stack of notebooks in her passenger seat. Her name was Valerie, a professor researching grassroots architectural protest movements in postmodern suburbia. I offered her a seat beneath the new stained glass dome and poured us both lemonade. "This place is a paradox," she said after the tour. "It's defiant but welcoming. It mocks authority but creates structure. It began as resistance but evolved into preservation." I nodded. "It's a mailbox." We laughed, but I could tell she got it. Really got it. She spent 3 days documenting the site, taking photos, interviewing locals, even borrowing a copy of my first zoning book. Before leaving, she handed me a USB drive. "I'm publishing a case study," she said. "But even if no one reads it, I want you to have this, in case someone ever tries to rewrite the story." That hit me harder than I expected. Because yes, things fade, memories blur, people forget, but monuments endure. And that's when the final idea came to me. A time capsule. I gathered a small group, founding neighbors, a few of the apprentices, even Gina, now retired from the HOA but still our unofficial ambassador of reason. We filled the capsule with pieces of the story, a piece of the original Cedar Post, the first letter Sharon ever sent me, a signed guestbook page from the first Tower Day, a scroll with the names of every known HOA across the US that had rewritten its bylaws because of us, and finally, a small iron replica of the tower crafted by Noor's welding class. We buried it beneath the tower's base, marked with a bronze plate that read, "Do not unearth until the mail stops coming." Symbolic, sure, but deeply real to all of us. That evening, the entire neighborhood gathered for one final unveiling and updated crest carved above the tower's entrance. The new motto read, "Creativity, Community, Hostage." Kids danced, fireflies blinked, old folks clapped along to loot remixes from someone's Bluetooth speaker. There were banners, cider toasts, and a moment of silence for the fallen mailbox that started it all. And me, I stood a few paces back, heart full, eyes just a little damp, realizing that the fight was never really about mail. It was about the right to matter, to take up space, to say, "This is who I am," and not apologize for it. To the HOA that tried to erase me, thank you. You gave me the tower. To the neighbors who joined me, you gave it life. And to the mail carrier who still chuckles every time he slides a letter through the iron flap, you, my friend, gave it purpose. Now, when people walk by and ask, "Who built this?" the answer is easy. We did.